Hey there, friends. Welcome to the CFC Leadership Podcast, where we focus on everything campus ministry, college ministry, and young adult ministry related. Whether you're already working in one of these ministry areas, thinking about starting a ministry, or just have a burden for this age group, this podcast is meant just for you. I'm your host, Kyle Austin, and now it's time to join with us in today's conversation. I want to say a quick apology. If you listen to our episodes routinely, we put out one episode a month while school is in session, and we have had a delay coming back into the fall semester, and so I want to apologize, but we're getting caught back up now. We had a lot of adjustment to do with the campus house being established at the end of the spring semester and launching back off in the fall, and so just trying to get schedules situated, and everything is running great, and so we're ready to jump back into our episodes just to try to be a help and a resource to you as you work in college and career ministry or campus ministry, as they both blend together so often. And so we're going to talk about this. Don't measure your success by your numbers. Now, so many times we do try to measure our success by our numbers. Why? Because it's something tangible. It's something we can see. It's something we can touch. And as you do ministry, of course, we want to measure our effectiveness. We want to see if we're being successful. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And often what we will turn to is to see how many people came out to the event or how many people showed up to Bible study. And we'll say, well, that was a successful event because, hey, we had a record number. Hey, we had a good sized group. Or, hey, we had this many come through the door. Hey, we had this many visitors. Now, this can be a indicator, if you will, of success, or it can be a byproduct of success, but it is not a measurement for success. And I understand in ministry, it's hard to measure success because sometimes it's not like, hey, I did landscaping and lawn care for years. And, I go in, I put in the product or do the service and I walk away and I see the results of the work that I've done. Or when I worked at the building supply company, you had orders, you fulfilled the order, you delivered the product. And so there's tangible results of what you're doing. You're seeing numbers produced by those sales to see if you're being successful. But when we come to ministry, there are so many variables that are outside of our control that we cannot or should not use our numbers to measure our success. This can get us in a dangerous thing. I would even say this: measuring your success by your numbers is a trap. Now, think about how many times you go to social media and you're scrolling through and you're seeing great things, and you see other ministries, other churches, whether you're a pastor or whatever your ministry area may be, but you see other people within that same ministry or even in different types of ministries, and you see the highlights on social media. And so many times you'll walk away going, wow, they had a large group. Wow, look how much energy. Look how many students or how many college and career young adults, or hey, look how many attended that retreat or whatever it is. Wow, they're doing a much better job than I am or we are. You see, it becomes a trap when we begin to measure ourselves against others. That is not a true measurement of our success, and it's a trap when we measure our success by numbers or by other ministries and other people. Why? There always will be another ministry larger than yours. And God has reminded me of this just very strongly over this past year. Many of our campus ministries going through COVID, of course, was a hard time, just kind of scratching to figure out how to meet off campus, to do Zoom Bible studies. And so we moved to Greenville 5 years ago, and we traveled full-time for a few years, and then we assumed the leadership here at ECU right in the midst of COVID. And as we were coming off about a year and a half ago, we came back to be able to meet on campus, and it was pretty much just a restart. From the very beginning, we had just a couple students that we were able to still meet with, but we had a couple students, and that was great. And God gave us great growth over the next couple semesters, and, really some of the strongest numerical growth that we've seen in 12, 13 years of doing this ministry. And it was exciting, and it was awesome to see that, and to see the students reacting to wanting to know more about truth, wanting to find community, wanting to connect together. And it was just exciting to see all that. And you could base and say, well, wow, we're being super successful because we've got all these numbers coming through the doors. But what happens when the numbers begin to slow down, and when the the plane up begins to level out? Does that mean you're not being as successful? And one thing God kind of pressed on our heart to do, we're struggling to find a bigger room to meet in. We're kind of have grown out of it at the end of last semester, and we're unable to get a larger room that will work like we need it to. And there's a kickoff event at every beginning of every semester, and you want to be there. We've been there for 12, 13 years with ministries because it's so important to find new students, to advertise your ministry. There's just a lot of excitement and energy that goes on at these events. But God pressed on our heart not to attend this one here at ECU, and that was so hard for me. I just couldn't quite wrap my mind around why I felt God was leading me to do that, because I knew there were freshmen, there was new students out there that we needed to meet, that we needed to be a part of our ministry. And God has just been working on my heart over the last year. And we've always said this within our ministry, quality over quantity. We're not so much interested in numbers as we are in building students with a spiritual foundation, helping them know what they believe, why they believe it, helping them to have leadership opportunities. That's what our emphasis is. And so I've known that and we've taught that, but as we walked into this fall semester, God has just pressed last spring semester and this semester, focus on the students I have given you. Stop worrying so much about building the numbers. But the numbers show us. The numbers make us look good. The numbers are tangible results that you and I can see and touch. And so we feel like that shows us our success. But we knew we're supposed to focus on building relationships with the students that we already have. And the campus house, that's a big part of why we were a little bit behind on the new episodes here. It's an awesome ministry opportunity. But how do I and my wife measure the success of this house? We don't have any other model to compare it to. There are some similar models out there, but how do you measure the success? Is it how many times the door opens? Is it how many students that are there? What do we measure success by? And I want to say this, measuring success by your numbers is the wrong measuring stick. So what is the right measuring stick? Success is measured simply by doing what God has called you to do. You say that sounds too simple, but it's the truth. You are successful in God's eyes when you're doing exactly what He has called you to do. There are so many variables outside of your hands. You and I are responsible for our obedience. We're not responsible for people's reactions. I can say it like this. We're responsible for our actions, not responsible for people's reactions. And that's important for us to know that, because you and I are responsible to get the gospel out, but we're not responsible for how people respond. That is God's job. And so that's why we cannot and should not measure our success by the number of people who attend our events. You are successful if you're doing what God has called you to do. I am being successful today, last week, the previous week, because I'm giving everything I have to doing what God has called me to do. The results and the amount of students who respond is up to Him. Now, we phenomenally had 8 students get saved this past month. That sounds great. There are other ministries that have had more. So am I not successful because those other ministries have had more? Or am I not going to be successful because next month, hypothetically speaking, we may have 0 or we may have 2 or 3. And so we go, oh, wow, we were successful for that month, but not this month. No, that is the wrong measuring stick to measure your success. If God has called you to be the college and career pastor and you're doing that faithfully, you are being successful. If you are called to pastor the church, if you're called to be the youth pastor, if you're called to be a student leader, if you're called to go to college, if you're called to that vocation, you are being successful. Success is measured by doing what God has created you to do. You could never be more successful. You and I have to get rid of or watch out for the trap of measuring ourselves against others, because what happens when we begin to feel other people are more effective because they have more people, we begin to feel less than of ourselves. We begin to doubt our calling. We begin to doubt our effectiveness. We begin to try other things when maybe what we were doing was already working. Now, there's nothing wrong with setting goals. Me and my wife, we set goals for ministry. We meet once a year for a vision week just to plan out the year, plan out our goals, and how do we meet goals the previous year? Nothing wrong with any of that. But how you meet goals is measured by, are you simply doing what God has called you to do? Because in God's eyes, you are being faithful. You are being successful if you're doing what He's called you to do. There's so much more that goes into ministry. Reaching people is important, but spiritual growth is just as important. But it's so hard to measure spiritual growth, which I think is why so often we come back to or go to measuring it by the numbers. You know, we can knock on as many doors as possible and set goals of, hey, we're going to knock on 100 doors today, or we're going to knock on all 3,000 apartment doors by the beginning of the fall semester. These are all goals that we've done. But is that any more successful than taking 3 people and discipling them for that semester? You see, it's hard to see the spiritual growth, and that's why our success is not measured by the numbers. You could be more successful than the other person if you reach one person and disciple them than them going and knocking on 1,000 doors and sharing the gospel. While that number 1,000 seems more than the 1, or seems more than the 3, or more than the 5, that is not the measuring stick, and we use that too often to the neglect of what true success is measured by. And so if you're doing what God has called you to do, you're being that college pastor, the college and career pastor, and you're just giving your heart and you're being faithful to it, guess what? You are being successful. If God's called you to that campus and you're doing everything you can to reach it, you're being faithful in reaching students, you're being faithful in building community, you're being faithful in trying to disciple, you're responsible for your actions. God is responsible for their reactions. And if you're being faithful with your actions and doing what God has called you to do, then you are being successful. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share it with a friend or subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.